In the quiet, dimly lit office of the SM Mall's night shift security, a young guard named Alex sat with a pen poised over a thick rulebook. The clock ticked closer to 10 p.m., his shift start time. His eyes scanned the pages, taking in the words that were to be his Bible for the next 8 hours. The air was still, almost eerie, and the distant hum of the shopping mall's lights provided the only company. Alex had always been a rule follower, and he intended to take this job seriously. His mind was sharp, his senses honed, ready to tackle whatever the night might throw at him. The office was small and functional, with a single desk and a chair that had seen better days. A large bank of monitors flickered blue in the corner, displaying feeds from various cameras scattered throughout the sprawling complex. The walls were lined with shelves filled with binders and manuals, and a water cooler in the corner gurgled occasionally, breaking the silence. Alex took a deep breath, the smell of stale coffee and cleaning supplies lingering in the air. He knew the mall inside out, having spent many a teenage weekend exploring its corridors, but working here was a different experience entirely. The rulebook was filled with standard procedures: how to handle lost and found, what to do in case of emergencies, and the protocol for dealing with mall walkers and after-hours stragglers. His curiosity grew, but he remained focused, knowing that understanding them was crucial to his job. Alex had heard stories, whispers from other guards about things that happened after dark in the mall. The rumors were always vague, never anything concrete, but enough to make his skin crawl. He didn't put much stock in ghost stories, but the silence of the empty mall was beginning to get to him. He swallowed, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. It was just a job, he told himself. Just follow the rules and everything would be fine. And with that thought, he turned the page to continue his reading, unaware that the rules he was memorizing were about to become more than just guidelines for an uneventful night. The next set of rules were titled Anomalies. They began with a stern warning: should you encounter anything out of the ordinary, do not panic. Follow the procedures outlined below to the letter. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Anomalies? What kind of anomalies could happen in a mall? He read on, his eyes widening with every line. Rule number 1, if you hear the sound of a child laughing in an unoccupied store, do not investigate. Call for backup immediately. Rule number 2, if any of the escalators begin to move in reverse, do not attempt to reset them. Seal off the area and notify the night manager. Rule number 3, if the lights in the food court flicker in a pattern of 3 quick bursts, evacuate the area and proceed to the nearest exit. The rules grew more bizarre, detailing what to do if the fountain began to spurt blood-red water or if the music system played a tune not on the approved playlist. Alex's skepticism began to wane as he read through the list, each entry more unsettling than the last. It dawned on him that these weren't just tall tales to spook new employees. There was a history here, a pattern of unexplained events that the mall's management had learned to anticipate and control. He felt a shiver run down his spine, and not just from the cold air conditioning. He had always loved the mall, but now he realized it had a darker side, one that was about to become very real to him. As he reached the end of the anomalies section, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced up at the monitors, expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him, but the feeds were normal. Shoppers bustled through the mall, blissfully unaware of the secrets it held once they left. He stood up and stretched, his eyes scanning the room, but nothing was out of place. Just as he was about to resume his reading, the lights in the office flickered. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Was it just a fluke? Or was it the start of something much more sinister? He took a deep breath and checked the time. 10 p.m. His shift had begun. It was time to put the rules to the test. With the rulebook in hand, Alex decided to conduct a preliminary sweep of the mall. He started with the food court, his steps echoing through the empty space. The lights above hummed steadily, no sign of the eerie pattern from the rulebook. He breathed a sigh of relief and moved on to the children's play area. The colorful plastic slides and climbing structures looked innocent enough in the moonlight filtering through the skylights. As he approached the toy store, the sound of laughter made him freeze. It was faint, almost like it was coming from the walls themselves. He swallowed hard, his hand hovering over the radio. Was this a test? A prank from the other guards? Or was it rule number 1 coming to life? Against his better judgment, Alex decided to investigate. He knew the rule was clear, but he had to know if the stories were true. He stepped into the darkened store, his flashlight beam bouncing off the shelves of lifeless dolls and action figures. The laughter grew louder, seemingly coming from the back. His heart raced as he approached the source. There, in the aisle of board games, stood a small, antique rocking horse, rocking back and forth on its own. The sound of creaking wood filled the air, punctuated by the eerie giggles. Alex's hand trembled as he reached for the horse, his mind racing with thoughts of what could be causing this. Just as his fingers brushed the cold, painted wood, the laughter stopped. The rocking horse's motion ceased, leaving an unnatural stillness. Alex's breathing was the only sound in the store, and even that seemed too loud. He took a step back, his eyes never leaving the now silent toy. He had heard the stories, but he never thought he would encounter something like this on his first night. He knew he should call for backup, but something held him there, his curiosity piqued. He took another step closer, leaning in to examine the horse. That was when he saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible tag attached to the horse's mane. It read, "Do not remove." With a mix of dread and fascination, Alex realized he had found his first anomaly, and he hadn't even made it through the first hour of his shift. The radio on his hip crackled to life. "Alex, you okay in there?" It was his supervisor, Mark. "Yeah, I think I've got something," Alex replied, his voice shaking slightly. "Stay put, I'm on my way," Mark responded, his voice firm and unyielding. Moments later, Mark burst into the store, his flashlight sweeping over the aisles. He took in the scene and nodded solemnly. "It's real all right," he said, his voice low. "But remember the rules. We're here to keep an eye, not to interfere." Alex nodded, his heart racing as Mark called for backup. 2 other guards, Janice and Marcus, arrived, looking equally grim. Janice, a seasoned veteran of the night shift, took one look at the rocking horse and nodded. "We've had reports before," she said, her voice calm. "But it's never moved like that." "Follow the protocol," Mark instructed. "Seal off the store and notify the night manager." Alex watched as Janice and Marcus quickly secured the area with yellow caution tape, their movements precise and practiced. They had done this before. Mark put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid," he said. "But now, you gotta move on. The mall's a big place, and we've got a lot of ground to cover." With a final glance at the rocking horse, Alex followed Mark out of the store. The laughter had left no trace, no echo to hint at the horror it had brought to the otherwise mundane task of securing the mall. As they walked away, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he had just uncovered a piece of a much larger puzzle, one that went beyond the scope of his rulebook and into the realm of the unexplained. His next stop was the other end of the mall, the electronics section, where the lights had been flickering on and off in a pattern that was all too familiar. As they approached, the lights grew more erratic, the shadows playing tricks on his eyes. He took a deep breath and readied himself for whatever lay ahead. The rules were clear, and he had backup. But the mall had its secrets, and it seemed determined to share them with him tonight. The flickering grew more intense, and the air grew colder as they approached the source. The lights in the electronics section danced in a macabre ballet, painting the aisles with a strobe of darkness and artificial light. Alex could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, and he swallowed hard, his mouth dry. Mark's hand on his shoulder was the only thing keeping him from bolting. "Remember the protocol," he murmured. Alex nodded, his eyes glued to the chaotic display of lights. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to be coming from the very walls themselves. The night manager, Mrs. Castillo, met them at the entrance to the electronics department, her face a mask of grim determination. She had seen this before. "The spirits are restless tonight," she said, her voice carrying a hint of something ancient and weary. "We must be vigilant." With a nod to Mark, she took charge, her eyes scanning the flickering lights with a practiced gaze. Alex watched as she opened a small, leather-bound book and began to murmur an incantation under her breath, her words a mix of English and a language he didn't recognize. The lights responded, their erratic dance slowing and finally coming to a halt. Mrs. Castillo closed the book with a snap. "The barrier holds for now," she said. "But the night is still young." The guards exchanged a look. The air was thick with tension as they continued their rounds. As they walked, Alex couldn't help but think of the mall's history, of the countless feet that had trodden these floors, the lives that had been lived and lost here. And now, as he patrolled the empty corridors, he felt a new weight upon him, the burden of keeping those spirits at bay. With each step, the rules of his rulebook grew heavier, each one a tether to reality in a world that was slowly revealing its true nature to him. He was no longer just a security guard, he was a sentinel, standing between the world of the living and the vengeful dead. And as the night grew longer, the whispers grew louder, reminding him that the rules were not just guidelines, but a sacred pact that held back the tide of darkness. The next few hours were a blur of anomalies and eerie encounters. They found a puddle of water in the shoe store, where it never should have been, and a rack of clothes that swayed as if in an invisible breeze. Each time, the rules provided the answer, the way to maintain order amidst the chaos. The mall's history began to unravel before Alex's eyes, each strange occurrence a thread in a tapestry of horrors that stretched back to the very foundation of the building. He had always thought of the mall as a bastion of commerce and normalcy, a place of laughter and life. But now, as the moon climbed higher in the sky, he knew it was so much more. It was a tomb, a battleground, a prison for lost souls seeking retribution. And he was the jailer, armed only with a radio, a flashlight, and a rulebook that was quickly becoming his Bible. Then, as the clock chimed the start of the 4th hour, a flicker on the monitors caught Alex's eye. It was a section of the mall he hadn't noticed before, a hidden basement level that seemed to have been swallowed by time. The corridor on the screen was lined with stores that had been shuttered for what looked like decades, their logos faded and forgotten. The camera feed was grainy and filled with static, but he could make out an ominous, pulsing light coming from the far end. His heart racing, Alex pointed it out to Mark, who leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "I've never seen that before," he murmured. The other guards gathered around, their curiosity piqued. Marcus leaned in, his hand brushing the monitor as if he could feel the cold emanating from the screen. "Looks like we've got ourselves a real mystery," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Janice, ever the professional, checked her gear. "We need to go down there," she said firmly. "Whatever's causing that light could be dangerous." Mark nodded, his hand on the radio. "I'll notify the night manager," he said, his voice tight. "We're going in." The four of them made their way to the service elevator, the air around them feeling heavier with each step. The elevator doors opened with a groan, revealing a cage that had seen better days. They descended into the bowels of the mall, the lights flickering as they went, the elevator's descent painfully slow. The pulsing light grew stronger with each floor they passed, the whispers more insistent. When the doors finally opened, they stepped out into a world that seemed frozen in time. The basement level was a ghost of the mall above, a shadowy mirror of forgotten dreams and discarded lives. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay, and the silence was so absolute it was deafening. Alex's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a sign that read, "Employees only." Beyond it, the pulsing light grew brighter, casting eerie shadows on the floor. They moved forward, their footsteps echoing through the emptiness. The light grew closer, a beacon in the dark, and the whispers grew to a cacophony. They turned a corner and found themselves in the abandoned wing, the air thick with the presence of the otherworldly. The light was coming from a single, unassuming store, its door slightly ajar. Alex could feel the energy building, the rules in his hand seemingly useless against whatever lay beyond. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, the light spilling out and washing over them. Inside, the store was a riot of color, filled with toys and trinkets that gleamed in the unearthly glow. In the center of the room, a fountain bubbled with a thick, oily liquid that matched the pulsing light. And standing before it, a figure that made Alex's blood run cold. It was a child, or at least it had been once. Now, it was a twisted, malformed creature, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. It turned to face them, a grin spreading across its misshapen features, and the whispers grew into a roar. The child thing spoke, its voice a symphony of the lost and the damned. "Welcome," it said, its tone mockingly sweet. "You've found me. Now, you must play." And with that, it gestured to the fountain, the light pulsing in time with its words. Alex looked to Mark for guidance, but his supervisor's eyes were wide with fear. The rules had failed them. They were in uncharted territory now, and the only thing that stood between them and the creature was their courage and their wits. The creature's grin widened, and it began to advance. "The game has only just begun," it sang, its voice echoing through the deserted hall. Alex knew they had to act, had to do something before it was too late. He took a step forward, his hand tightening on the flashlight. "We don't have to do this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let us leave in peace." The creature's laughter filled the air, a sound that made their very souls tremble. "Peace," it said, its voice a chorus of lost whispers. "There can be no peace for those who disturb the slumber of the forgotten." Alex felt a sudden chill run down his spine, his mind racing. There had to be a connection, a reason for these anomalies. As he scanned the store, his eyes fell on a dusty newspaper article tucked behind a shelf. It was yellowed with age, the headline screaming of a tragedy long past: "Fire at SM Mall claims dozens of lives, including young child." The date matched the year the basement level was closed. The truth began to dawn on him, the pieces of the puzzle slowly fitting together. He turned to his colleagues, his voice firm. "This isn't just a game," Alex said. "These spirits are trapped, bound to the mall by something dark. We need to find out what happened, set them free." Janice nodded, her hand moving to the small cross she wore around her neck. Marcus tightened his grip on his flashlight, his eyes determined. Mark, ever the skeptic, looked at Alex with a mix of doubt and newfound respect. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the creature. "We find out the truth," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "We need to talk to someone who was here when it all went down. Maybe then, we can find a way to end this." Mrs. Castillo's words from earlier echoed in his mind. "The night is young," she had said. But with each passing minute, the mall's secrets grew more urgent, the stakes higher. They had to move quickly, before the barrier between worlds grew too thin to contain the malevolent force growing stronger by the moment. They left the basement, the pulsing light and the creature's laughter fading behind them. Alex's mind raced as they searched the mall's archives, looking for any clue that could lead them to the truth. Hours ticked by, the mall's ghosts watching them from the shadows. They found old blueprints, newspaper clippings, and even a diary belonging to a former mall employee who had witnessed the fire. The more they read, the more the gravity of their situation became clear. The child they had encountered was not just any spirit, it was the vengeful soul of a boy who had perished in the flames, seeking justice for himself and the others who had suffered with him. The night grew darker, the whispers louder. The mall's very foundation seemed to groan with the weight of the secrets it held. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the skylights, Alex knew they were running out of time. They had to find a way to appease the spirits, to give them the closure they so desperately needed. With a newfound sense of purpose, they gathered their findings and prepared to confront the creature one last time. The truth was their weapon, the key to freeing the souls that had been trapped for so long. They would not fail them. The four guards descended into the basement again, their hearts heavy with the burden of what they had learned. The pulsing light grew stronger as they approached the store, the whispers now a deafening roar. The creature waited for them, its grin more sinister than before. "You seek to meddle in the affairs of the dead," it cackled. "You cannot undo what has been done." But Alex was ready. He stepped forward, the rulebook in one hand and the truth in the other. "We know what happened here," he said, his voice carrying through the chaos. "We know your pain, and we offer you peace." He recounted the story of the fire, of the innocents lost, of the injustices that had been buried with the ash. The creature's eyes narrowed, the light around it flickering as it listened. And when he was done, it was silent. The whispers ceased, the mall holding its breath as if waiting for the creature's verdict. Then, with a sigh that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building, it spoke. "Truth," it said, its voice now a single, mournful cry. "That is all I ever wanted. Now, set us free." Alex stepped closer, the barrier between them wavering. "We will," he promised. "But you must first tell us how." The creature's form began to shift, the malformed features smoothing into a semblance of the child it once was. "You must speak the names of the lost," it said, its voice now a soft whisper. "Call them forth, and let them know they are remembered." The guards looked at each other, understanding passing between them. They had a mission now, a way to end the cycle of fear and anger that had consumed them all for so long. Alex nodded, turning to Mark, Janice, and Marcus. "We need to find the families," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to hold a healing event, right here in the mall. A memorial to lay the past to rest." The creature nodded, the pulsing light dimming slightly. "Their grief is what binds us," it said, its eyes glowing with a sad wisdom. "If they can find peace, so too can we." They spent the next few days reaching out to the families of the fire's victims, sharing the story of the trapped souls and the need for closure. To their surprise, many were open to the idea, eager to find a way to honor their loved ones. The mall's management, when presented with the evidence and the creature's plea, agreed to host the event. It was a risk, but the alternative was unthinkable. The day of the memorial arrived, and the mall was transformed. The basement level was open for the first time in decades, now a space of remembrance adorned with candles and photos. The surviving families gathered, their faces a mix of sorrow and hope. Alex stood before them, the rulebook in his hand, now a symbol of the unspoken pact that had bound the spirits and the mall's living guardians. "We are here to remember," he said, his voice strong and clear. "To speak the names of those we have lost, and to set them free." One by one, the families stepped forward, their voices shaking as they recounted stories of laughter and love, of lives cut too short. The creature, now a shimmering specter of light, listened intently, its form becoming less terrifying with each name spoken. The whispers grew softer, the anger and pain draining away like water through a sieve. The mall itself seemed to sigh with relief as the weight of the past lifted, the air growing lighter with each passing moment. As the final name was spoken, the light grew blinding, enveloping the room. Alex shielded his eyes, feeling a warmth that seemed to fill every corner of his being. When he lowered his hand, the creature was gone, the fountain now filled with clear, sparkling water. The families wept openly, their grief now mixed with a sense of release. The mall had become a place of peace, the spirits of the lost now free to move on. The guards watched as the basement level returned to its natural state, the years of neglect and decay peeled away like layers of an onion. The air was clear, the whispers silenced. The rules had served their purpose, guiding them through the darkness to the light of understanding. Alex knew that his job had changed that night, from one of mere vigilance to one of guardianship over a place of rest. The mall was no longer just a job, it was a sanctuary, a monument to those who had suffered and a testament to the healing power of remembrance. And as the first shoppers of the day began to filter in, oblivious to the events of the night before, Alex and his colleagues returned to the security office, their shift over. They were changed, bound now by a shared experience that no one else could fully comprehend. They had faced the mall's darkest secrets and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the night might bring. But now, as the sun rose over the sprawling complex, they knew that their most important duty was not to enforce the rules, but to honor the memories of those who had come before them. And in doing so, they had become more than just guards. They had become the custodians of a silent story, the keepers of a peace that had been a long time in the making.